Hello and welcome to Eye to Eye, a podcast about film with me, Cathal McKeown.
And me, Oisin Griffin. In this episode, we'll be breaking from our usual format and doing a super deep dive into Under the Silver Lake. We hope you enjoy.
So, what did you think of Under the Silver Lake?
I thought it was fantastic. It's the best movie I've seen in a very long time.
Dude, me too.
Fantastic. Yeah, I thought it was really original.
I've watched it 3 times now because it's released on Mubi over here.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, luckily I can stream it. But yeah, each time I watch it, I'm like more convinced it's the best film I've seen in years.
Yeah, I've seen it twice, and I think it is a movie that rewards repeated viewings because you just pick up on new details each time.
Yeah, and it almost becomes a different movie each time. Or you read people's mannerisms differently. Like the first time I thought, you would think one person is kind of suspicious, and then the second time you think, oh, maybe they're not suspicious, they're just kind of emotional.
Yeah. There's the people's actions, but there's also a lot of details that are buried inside the narrative that you can unearth if you want to, or like rabbit holes you can jump down and like may not lead anywhere, but we'll probably get to that later, but that's kind of the point of the narrative.
Yeah, I feel like we chose to do a bumper episode on this one because it's such a vast film to try and discuss in like 20 minutes to half an hour.
Yeah, we wouldn't do it justice.
No, but I also, as you said, yeah, we'll get to it. I feel like there's going to be a sense of futility in trying to unpack the mysteries too much because I don't know how deep we can actually get with them.
Yeah, well, the point of the mystery, in my interpretation, was that it was kind of futile to begin with.
Yeah, same here.
Cool.
Okay, so I guess we should start with just kind of a general overview. I mean, what did you think of the look of the film?
Yeah, the photography was really, like, obviously it has the kind of classic La La Land, kind of like saturated LA color palette.
Yeah.
But some of the setups of the shots were really impressive. Camera movement was kind of like Wellesian in that it was quite often low.
Yes.
And then you had like little elaborate setups, like when a squirrel falls from a tree dead in the first couple of seconds of the movie. He's got this rapid whip pan down. So like there are a lot of little stylistic flourishes in the movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think almost every significant shot is taken from a classic movie.
Yeah.
And there's loads, like that's kind of the joy of the film in one way, is trying to figure out where all those shots come from. Like there's one I only picked up on where it's the first time he enters his apartment and the camera kind of like flies down the hall towards him and around this corner and lands him outside the door, and it's like such a dramatic camera movement just to show him walking through the door of his apartment.
Yeah.
Or when he's in the Hollywood Forever cemetery and he's chasing after one of the girls. There's one shot in the middle of the sequence where the camera is kind of behind him and above him, and he's kind of lurching, and it really reminded me of like American Werewolf in London.
Oh, okay. That's a cool reference.
Yeah, just like one shot. I mean, the other shots, the camera is like attached to him, so he kind of lurches along with him, or it's behind him showing him running. And it's just this one shot in the middle of it where he literally looks like some sort of weird, animatronic monster running after her.
Yeah, he's kind of like Frankenstein.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's also sprayed by a skunk at one point, and for the rest of the movie, that smell follows him. He can't get rid of it.
Well, actually, the second time I watched it, I noticed that when Ricky Lindholm, who plays his actress friend...
Oh, yeah, from Garfunkel and Oates.
Yeah, when she comes around to his apartment the first time, before he gets sprayed by the skunk, she says to him something like, "You smell really bad." And he gets really flustered and says, "Oh, there's a lot of skunks in Los Angeles. It's a real problem here."
And he hasn't been sprayed yet?
No, that only happens maybe half an hour later.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. It's kind of like the prophetic fallacy then, in relation to all of the conspiracy theories that he starts spouting later on. It kind of maybe gives them a bit of credibility. We won't dismiss them straight away. And if all the hearsay on the streets of LA is to be believed, the skunk problem has already confirmed that some of it might be true.
Yeah, completely. I think it's that, and I think Well, I think maybe it's useful getting into this a little bit because it kind of mirrors a lot of the other mysteries in the film or themes. But so when I watched that and I noticed her saying that to him in that little conversation, I'm attaching some sort of meaning to that might not be there. I mean, that's something that occurs multiple times a day, like these little coincidences. And I look at that and I go, oh, she said that to him before he gets sprayed by the skunk. So maybe there's some kind of thing there. Maybe there's something he's hiding in the house that smells, and that's what's making him smell. Because he kind of looks around all his cupboards, or is he just looking around and I'm attaching that to him because there is this unanswered question of, is he the mysterious dog killer?
Oh.
And so I'm watching that and I'm thinking, oh, is the smell, like, does he have dead dogs hidden in these cupboards? And that's the smell. And when he gets sprayed by the skunk, that's just incidental because he already has this stench.
And is that why he's so enamored with Riley Keough's dog?
Maybe. That's the thing. Maybe.
Yeah, because the identity of the dog killer is never revealed.
No, and I think it's the opening shot is in that coffee shop and someone's graffitied on the window, "Beware the dog killer." Yeah. The camera kind of pans around and we see him, Sam, looking at it, and then he does this really slight kind of smirk and then turns around again.
Oh, okay.
But it's gone in a flash. But I think that's kind of the whole point of the film, is that could mean something or it could mean absolutely nothing.
Well, the opening shot of a movie always, well, in a good movie, holds some significance with regard to the narrative. Like, the opening shot is generally stating the theme for the entire movie.
Yeah.
So in reading into the meaning of the opening shot, I think it's very deliberate the way they set up the "Beware the dog killer," I'd say subplot maybe, from the outset. It's linked with the Andrew Garfield character from the outset. So I don't think we're going off on a weird tangent here. I think he might be the dog killer.
I think he could be too. I mean, there's loads of little things that could point to that. I know he has the skunk stench on him, but every time he passes a dog in the film, it starts barking at him. And I think there's two sequences where he's on the phone to people and he's walking by these rows of houses in the suburbs, and clearly every house has a dog, and every dog is barking and running at him, trying to get out of the house to attack him. And he says near the beginning that a dog bit him when he was younger, his uncle's dog or something, and it terrified him. Or that he had a dog that died. There's loads of references. You know, that he keeps seeing women in kind of these weird surreal dreams barking at him.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So it's some weird neuroses he has.
Yeah, and he also carries around dog biscuits. Like, the homeless guy at the end accuses him of being the dog killer and starts asking him why he has the dog biscuits in his pocket.
Yeah. And we do know that the Andrew Garfield character is capable of, I wouldn't say unprovoked, but random acts of extreme violence.
Extreme violence.
We see that for the first time when he is spying on his neighbors and then spots some kids nearby spraying like silly string all over his expensive, what kind of car does he drive? Some really nice sports car. Yeah,
it's a Dodge GT, I think.
Ooh, yeah. Well, it's repossessed. Like, it's not his. He's like paying in installments for it. But yeah, still he loses the head and beats up some teenage kids. Is this total overreaction, and it makes us kind of question his motives for the rest of the movie. How like just is he really?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a shot of his face while he's cramming the egg into the kid's mouth.
Yeah.
He looks like an absolute monster. He's like veins popping and completely red.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield is amazing in this movie.
Man, he's so good.
He goes from menacing, or like properly creepy menacing in that scene, to like kind of cute and whimsical when he goes to Purgatory, the club, and like he's watching the balloon girl and he's totally entranced by this whole scene.
Yep, just tripping on whatever pill they give him when he walks in.
Yeah, that one shot when he's watching the balloon girl like dance through the crowd of people.
Yeah,
and the vampire brides, the brides of Jesus, are in the background playing.
Yeah.
And like he does this really cute thing with the pin. Like he puts it up to his cheek and like throws it away really quickly. Like kind of, I don't know, like he doesn't really
I know exactly what shot you mean. Yeah, it's when she's kind of going around and people are popping all the balloons.
Yeah.
And as she kind of almost gets to him, and I think there's only one balloon left.
Yeah.
He does that. Yeah, he kind of and he throws away the pin.
He's kind of like, oh no, not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to me he really reminded me, and I know it's a film that's going to get compared to this a lot, but like Elliot Gould in The Long Goodbye.
Yeah.
And like I think in that movie, Elliot Gould is kind of like an aging detective.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of ambles around and he's just so sick of it all that he's kind of just doesn't really give a shit, just kind of limping about the place.
Yeah.
Kind of loose-limbed. And Andrew Garfield's Sam has the exact same kind of walk in this, where it's more like a millennial millennial dissatisfaction, or he's kind of just like, whatever.
Yeah. Well, this movie is essentially a postmodern detective movie.
Well, I've found out about this not new, it's about 10 years old, but this new school of thought called meta-modernism.
Okay.
What
does that mean?
So what metamodernism is, and the more I read into it, the more I'm absolutely convinced that this whole film is kind of like a meta-modernistic statement. Or like it's the most pure example of what metamodernism is. So it's this phrase coined by these two Dutch guys. And the idea is that postmodernism has gotten to a point where it's kind of dead in the water. Everything is ironic, everything is deconstructed, like there's no meaning, and everyone's kind of sick of it.
Yeah, meaning isn't fixed. And
exactly.
Yeah, people are rudderless, essentially.
Exactly. But their idea is that like it's resulted in this kind of an ennui where people are bored and postmodernism has just kind of run its course. So they call metamodernism a structure of feeling, where their idea is, and it's not a school in a way, it's not a practice, it's more a way of, it's like a mode of analysis, I would say. And their idea is that since like maybe the mid 2011 onwards, people have been yearning again for some sort of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of metamodernism is that they say it oscillates between modernism, where there is such thing as like a grand narrative or a meta-narrative, and postmodernism, where that is rejected and it's all about the individual narrative. And their idea is that two things can coexist, and you can have a bit of one and a bit of the other, so that sincerity can also live beside and within irony. So like an example would be like that movie Spring Breakers, where a lot of it is them just like drinking, partying, doing these ridiculous things, but beside that they also have these kind of grand spiritual discussions, these how much it meant to them, and there's this kind of really serious, sincere quality to the film.
Yeah, well, Spring Breakers is also this weird postmodern mashup of different genres. Like it's got the coming of age, like the one summer to like become who you really want to be sort of thing. It's typical in the coming of age movie, but it's also got elements of the musical in there, the gangster movie. I don't know, name it. It's probably in there.
Yeah, but it's also very sincere. Like there's a genuine feeling to it. I feel like with postmodernism, the whole thing would be kind of ironic and silly, whereas some of the kind of speeches the girls give and kind of some moments are like really kind of tender and beautiful. So I think what Under the Silver Lake is, to me, what the whole thing is about is how everything old is kind of recycled and it's devalued and it's kind of referenced for the sake of being referenced. So, and you can kind of get levels of that in the movie. So from when they go to Hollywood Forever Cemetery and they're drinking on, the fake tombstones of movie stars, to him having all the posters up in his house, to most of the significant shots in the film referencing old movies, to Andrew Garfield holding up a Spider-Man poster with sticky hands as if he has like Spider-Man hands.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's clever.
And I think what the film is about is someone like him who is aware of all of this irony and aware that kind of this is all a bit insincere, searching desperately for some sort of meaning in that. Okay. And I think what the movie does is it imagines a world in which the meaning he seeks is possible. So at the end, when he gets the map out of the cereal box and finds the answer in his old random issue of a Nintendo Power magazine, the film is like, yeah, well, what if that happened? What if then he did find this hut in the middle of the desert? And what if that happened? And what if he did have some sort of sincere feeling?
What if conspiracy nut theories were right? Which is like what would be like would essentially establish a grand narrative for the postmodern, like an antidote for the postmodern condition, would be if these weird obsessions that millennials have with, you know, urban myths and code breaking and this sort of thing, actually turned out to have some substance to them.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the movie plays with that fascination.
Yeah, well, it's like when he visits the house of the guy who wrote the zine Under the Silver Lake from Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
And he says to him something like, you know, climate change, Wall Street, the owl's kiss, it's all connected. There's something connecting them all. And then Sam says, and my friend disappearing? And he goes, yes, of course, it's all connected. So that's kind of like a modernist approach. And Sam kind of like rolls his eyes as if like, really? Which would be the postmodernist approach.
Yeah, well, no, that guy's going for more of like a structuralist approach, as in A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. You know, everything is connected by like a chain of events. Whereas the postmodern thought process is more like free association. This might not necessarily lead to this directly, but if you look at it in this abstract way, they're connected. So I think the fact that he comes across that comic book writer, the zine writer, I should say, kind of helps him ground his thinking a little bit, because up to that point, his thinking is more postmodern and kind of up in the air, abstract. And it's probably significant that that guy's a little bit older than him, from a different generation and a different way of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we circle back to this meta-modernism thing?
Yeah.
So am I correct in thinking that basically metamodernism is kind of a yearning for the past or grand narratives from within the postmodern social climate? Is it like a nostalgia for the past?
Not even for the past, but it's a
nostalgia for structure, for meaning, for like greater
for meaning, yeah, for meaning and hope, basically.
Oh, okay.
But while still being fully aware and accepting the kind of postmodern outlook. So if you imagine it's almost like a pendulum that swings between modernism and postmodernism.
And like within modernism, just to circle back to that, structuralism is a very important kind of analytical principle. And like structuralism basically looks at logic and like jumping from idea to idea in terms of like a ladder. It's like all of these rungs. And post-structuralism is like all of these different ladders side by side, and you can jump between the ladders.
Yeah.
Like all of these like different disciplines, you can like look at music and then apply that to engineering or something and then jump back.
Yeah.
Whereas postmodernism is like the ladder is obliterated and there is no like structured, unified principle of thought.
Yeah. Well, I think the scene that really made me, the second time I watched it when I had this in mind, that kind of cemented that this is what the director was trying to do, was when he's playing Nintendo with Topher Grace's character.
Yeah.
Who kind of has these random philosophical discussions that tend to get cut off by like first time they're flying the drone and the girl starts undressing and he just stops in the middle of what he's saying, and the second time he finishes the level in Super Mario and stops what he's saying. So it's kind of these like very deep
philosophical musings, and then he gets distracted like a typical millennial and can't finish his thought. Yeah.
But he says to Sam, do you remember, like, wouldn't it be great to be back in the time when you could go into the forest and look under a rock and find something that had never been discovered before?
Yeah, exactly.
And then he says, we crave mysteries because there's no mysteries left. And I think that's kind of the thesis of the film, is like, what if you, like a film like Vertigo or Rear Window, what if you took that and put your protagonist as like a typical stoner millennial who's lost in life and can't pay his bills and is a bit, well, pretty like voyeuristic, a bit of a, you know, like toxic masculinity, all these kind of things, and put a guy who's craving for something to actually mean something. You know, you have that parrot across from him that you never find out what it says, but he's obsessed with finding out what it says.
Yeah.
And And finally, there's a mystery that starts.
And the older hippie lady who owns the parrot doesn't seem that bothered by it.
No, exactly.
Like Vertigo and Rear Window are also directly referenced in the movie.
Yeah.
And then he's on his balcony at the beginning with his binoculars, just watching his neighbors. And he discovers Riley Keough for the first time. And he watches her swimming in the pool. So that's obviously like James Stewart in Rear Window with his telescope.
Yeah.
And then that Riley Keough character disappears without a trace. And then the narrative turns into Vertigo, where, again, James Stewart goes looking for a missing woman.
Yeah. I mean, there's even the scene where he's following the three girls in his car, and the way the shots cut and the way the music plays is the exact same as Vertigo, where there's no like as far as I remember, there's no very strict cut. All the shots kind of slightly bleed into one another.
Yeah. In Vertigo, it's lots of long shots from the point of like first person shots from the point of view of the car, uninterrupted shots, following shots. Yeah,
exactly.
And also, it's significant that the girls are crowded around Hitchcock's grave when they're watching what would you call it, like an open movie screening in a park later on in the movie.
Oh yeah, and I think I've seen one or two critics saying that that's a really lame moment because like Hitchcock is literally in like, it's not his real grave obviously, but it's like in bold font on this huge headstone. Mm-hmm. But I think like David Robert Mitchell's having a lot of fun making it number one.
Yeah. And
I think that plays into the idea. I think it's set in LA for a reason, in that that's a place where you literally cannot escape the past, and you can't escape, the films made there, the music made there, the art made there. It's all literally around you, even under the ground. You can't watch a movie without literally standing on Hitchcock's grave, basically.
Well, like LA is a place of genre conventions, and like within a genre is a set of principles or structured meaning. It's through those genre principles that, maybe somebody who really needs meaning in their life, like the Andrew Garfield character, maybe that's why he's so attracted to Hollywood as the home of all of this meaning.
Absolutely.
But the problem is that's in the past now. And like that meaning isn't so like well defined anymore. It's all over the place. Genre has been like intermingled and like morphed into something different. So like that's what David Robert Mitchell does so well.
Yeah.
Like going back to his previous film, It Follows, which he also wrote and directed. He plays with like horror movie tropes and like mixes up the idea of the final girl to create, what would you say? Like the monster of the movie is essentially the final girl that also hunts the final girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like it's still feminist in the way that the girl has to fight back against this avenging angel thing that's coming to kind of punish her for being sexually
active.
Yeah, for being sexually active, which is like a thing in horror movies where you have to punish the virginal teen for, being sexually active, because that's very bad.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think I like the idea of this meta-modern thing, because it's like you can have the postmodern elements but still retain, or like still accept and nurture that yearning for hope or for meaning.
Yeah.
And I think that dichotomy of things like sincerity and irony and apathy and passion, Sam is like the vehicle for all of this. He goes, like we were saying earlier, he goes between kind of like a bumbling stoner to moments of extreme violence, and like it's bad passion, but it's still passion, to at the end where the homeless guy has him chained up, and it's like this out of nowhere, this like incredibly sad scene where he's saying that his girlfriend left him and he's been carrying around these dog biscuits in the hopes that he would meet her again and he could pet her dog and give him these biscuits, and he starts crying. And again, you could approach that and like laugh at it and be like, how ridiculous, but I was like, oh my god, this is so sad.
Yeah, like it goes from properly scary to properly endearing. Like the flipping and straddling those two extremes is like a delicate balancing act, but he manages to pull it off so well.
And I think it's super challenging as a viewer too, because you can't help but try and figure out the meaning of everything. And I mean, I think we both discovered that Reddit board where people are literally trying to figure out the meaning in everything, down to t-shirts, and
Yeah.
they're going through every shot and trying to find out what film it's referencing, down to there's a scene where he pulls the Jesus, that rock star character, off a toilet, and there's this random shot of what's in the toilet. And there's a whole thread on Reddit of people trying to figure out it's a reference to Hitchcock because Psycho was the first film to show a toilet in a film.
Okay.
Because they're like, why else would you have that shot there? But then the further you go into this Reddit thing, the more some of it does make sense, and there is like quite cool mysteries hidden within the film for you to go and find. But
Yeah. See, that's the obsession with like the gamer generation, like millennial gamers. They love Easter eggs because it gives you a sense of a grand narrative. And then, like the Topher Grace character was saying, you want to look under a rock and discover something new.
yes,
And the Easter egg, like people are looking, like the Reddit community is essentially looking for Easter eggs in the real world.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think what it is you're presented with the world of the film where kind of nothing makes sense. Like
Yeah.
if you dig into it, like nothing makes sense. But you can't help but be like, oh come on, this has to make sense in some way. And now it's spawned this thing where people are obsessing. I mean, even the second time I watched it, I rewound it because I was convinced that the first time or the only time he leaves Riley Keough's apartment, there's fireworks going on, that they both remark how weird it is that there's fireworks.
Yeah.
But the fireworks, the second time I watched it, I was like, oh my God, it's Morse code. Because it's like dots and dashes. And the way she's looking at the fireworks, I mean, I think she's looking at it because it's the last time she's going to see it, because she's about to get locked in this ascension chamber. But even I was like, oh my God, is it Morse code? Like, what's it trying to tell them? Which I think is interesting, because we are this generation that's grown up around postmodernism, where we're taught from a very young age to be skeptical and find most things ironic. And a lot of the humor and TV shows we like are all about referencing other things, like shows like Community or Family Guy or South Park.
Yeah.
Even the Simpsons, like the Simpsons, which we all grew up with, is extremely postmodern because it's kind of taking on the trope of the network sitcom, and every episode like references so many elements of pop culture. And I think we've grown up in a world where at a certain age you become burnt out by it. This film is kind of saying, well,
This is what you do when you become burnt out. Or this is it's kind of a catharsis as well. Or it's a catharsis, but it's also making you aware of that condition. Like, why am I feeling burned out? This is why.
But also, what if there is this grand narrative that's hidden beneath the surface? Like, what if there is actually this secret society of rich men that are building bunkers under LA and creating ascension chambers with women?
I think that's the catharsis, though. Like, that's so hyperbolic, and obviously is just there to make a compelling narrative. It's just used as a form, like, just to give somebody a grand narrative, like a greater meaning. But obviously, in the real world, that's not the case. If it is, sorry, but it's probably not the case.
No, definitely not. I think another way that it talks about this yearning for meaning is in the meaning we ascribe to pop culture.
Okay, how so?
People think that songs mean so much to them, and will say kind of hyperbolically that it's like this song was written for me, or TV shows or art, and we think these are kind of naively sometimes that these are pure expressions. And in the film, it imagines that all of these songs that Sam loves and he's grown up with and that means so much to him, he has that big Nirvana poster on his wall.
Yeah.
It imagines that no, all of this, there is this conspiratorial, again, grand narrative where all of these songs were manufactured, and actually all the meaning you derive from them wasn't real, because we made them for a reason, and we made them to make you do things, kids.
Yeah.
Down to your, like, from your granddads to you, we've been
subliminal advertising stuck in all of pop culture and media.
All of pop culture, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made people think certain ways, and I mean that is like the
Well, it's also like the ultimate, not doomsday theory, but like conspiracy theory. It's the ultimate conspiracy theory that like all advertising, Well, it is to an extent. All advertising contains a secret message that makes you do things that capitalism wants you to do to succeed.
Exactly. But I think the film then imagines that what if the meaning you derive from that pop culture, like, so what? What if it is meaningful? Which is why he finds the map in the end in
On
a
the
limited
cereal
edition
box.
cereal box.
Yeah.
Yeah, in his Nintendo Power Games comics. And his love for playing records backwards, which was such a, like, 70s and 80s
Yeah.
thing. Like, is it satanic messages? It's like, well, what if there was a hidden message?
He's a bit like the Doc Sportello character in Inherent Vice.
Very much so.
Like, I think Inherent Vice is another reference point. You mentioned The Long Goodbye earlier.
Yeah.
But Inherent Vice, it was like made in 2014 by Paul Thomas Anderson, but it's also a book by Thomas Pynchon.
Yeah.
And it's significant that that book was written in 2009, but it's set in the 70s. The fact that it was written in 2009 kind of leads the narrative to take on a postmodern element, and that Doc, the detective, his theories don't necessarily, like, A doesn't need to B to C to D. He just falls into everything, and like the narrative is so convoluted, and like for a finish, it's actually kind of simple. Had he done like proper police detective work, he probably could have done it or solved it more quickly. But it's so convoluted, and he's so lost in this like web of people and information that you end up kind of experiencing how disorienting it is to be so deeply embedded in the postmodern kind of simulacrum. This kind of feeling of alienation, this feeling of rudderlessness. And yeah, I think that character and that kind of narrative structure has been transposed onto Andrew Garfield and Under the Silver Lake to a very large extent.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. Pynchon is like the epitome of the postmodernist writer.
He really is.
I think in that film, in Inherent Vice,
a lot of the dialogue is quite Pynchon-esque in this as well. It's
definitely, man.
It's like serious, but at the same time, it's irreverent. And like another Pynchon-esque thing, which I suppose he like borrows from James Joyce, is like the absurd number of characters that are introduced in his novels, like to the point where you can't remember who such and such is.
No, and that's the thing with Pynchon. The first few chapters you're trying to follow it, and then
you just
kind
let
of have
yourself
to
go.
you either accept like bliss, or else you spend the rest of the couple hundred pages like going back and forth, being like, who the hell is that guy? What does that mean?
Yeah, ultimately there's no point in doing that. I was doing that and it was taking me forever to get through Gravity's Rainbow. I just said, just go with it.
No, yeah. I think that's why Inherent Vice to me is like almost the perfect postmodern film. Because it has that same thing where you start out trying to follow the narrative, and then he just portrays that kind of rudderlessness, as you said, so perfectly. You either become absolutely frustrated with it, or you kind of sit back with Doc and you're like, let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's just go along for the ride.
Yeah, because, there probably is no meaning to any of this, but like, maybe.
Yeah. And then we go along with Andrew Garfield's character for the ride. Just like, we know it's totally crazy that like the dog killer from the outset, like, okay, there's a dog killer. Oh no.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, we're not scared because we're not dogs. We're not in any danger. So we're going to watch this dog killer. But just things get increasingly weird. And I think that just makes the movie increasingly enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think those two films are very, very, very similar to one another. I think for me, Under the Silver Lake just has more of a hopeful message at its core than Inherent Vice does.
Yeah, Inherent Vice is more beware of the perils of capitalism and like all of the machinations that play underneath the surface that you will probably never understand because it's so convoluted.
Absolutely. And Under the Silver Lake is more like, yep, that's all true, but maybe there's still something, like maybe there's still like a needle in the haystack here.
Yeah.
Of meaning or hope.
Just like the needle he throws away.
Yeah, exactly.
The bubble,
well,
the
even when he
girls,
goes to that party and they say to him like, Welcome to Purgatory. There's a lot of that theme of like being between places is so prevalent in the whole film.
Yeah.
Between the living and the dead, between irony and sincerity, and Sam is always straddling that line and literally trying to find.
Yeah, when they welcome him to Purgatory, he's just like quips back. He's like, "Yeah, thanks. I thought I might take some time to think."
Yeah, exactly.
He's like playing up to this whole ironic narrative that they've set up. And like he gets a totally serious response from the girls. They're just like, enjoy.
Yeah.
So what did you think of that scene with the songwriter where he finally discovers and confronts the songwriter?
I was almost gleeful. I loved it so much.
Yeah.
I like stopped it and rewound it the first time I watched it. I loved it. The moment when he goes from kind of classical music to that Black Sabbath song Crazy Train. And he doesn't draw attention to it at first. I was just like, is he playing Crazy Train? And then he goes to the Backstreet Boys.
Yeah.
That medley it's so terrifying and hilarious and
kind of genius,
incredibly ominous.
Such a good idea.
Oh man, like that to me is one of the best scenes in years in any film. It's so good.
And then there's also the tension because he's being confronted, but what's he going to do about it? And like the Andrew Garfield Sam character is edging closer and closer to him. And
it's kind of the first real moment where everything he's believed, his whole apartment is like a shrine to pop culture. Mm-hmm. Even when he's like sleeping with a girl, what's in front of him is a giant Nirvana poster signed by Frances Cobain, Kurt's daughter. And he has a TV beside him with the TV on, and there's comics everywhere. And then he meets this guy who basically tells him, no, it's all a lie. It's all been constructed. That guy is he is postmodernism in a way. He's like, it's all constructed. None of it's real. There's no real narrative. You're just ascribing meaning to it. Sorry, man.
Yeah. But the first time when he confronts the songwriter, it kind of led some credibility to all of his theories and like shows that he's not on this weird fool's errand. He's not like Don Quixote or something. He actually has found something to be worried about.
Absolutely, but it also forces him to question kind of like the deepest parts of himself. Like if pop culture is such an incredibly huge part of his life, and now he's found out that's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And then to make matters worse, it starts trying to shoot him.
Yes. Like gun came out of nowhere.
It did, and then that reaction he has, in a way, it's justified. That's how I'd react if I found out like. The things I loved most were an absolute lie.
And like you were actually talking to the person who constructed all of those things. You weren't hearing it secondhand. You were hearing it from the source.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But I think what's really cool then is that's kind of the lowest point in the film for him. And I think then when he leaves, he gets the call that the guy who wrote the zine has been murdered. And he goes to his house and it's so. I was really quite scared by it when he sees the owl, owl's kiss.
Yeah.
But that is kind of like suddenly he's like, oh,
this is a real thing.
Yeah, he's like, maybe the songwriter wasn't totally correct. Maybe some of these things are true, and there is, meaning behind them. Like this guy got killed by this ridiculous urban legend.
Yeah. Do you think that's a real kind of mythical creature or some weird like government experiment assassin?
This is like a get out of jail free card, but I don't think it matters in a way.
Sure.
The fact that once it's in his apartment, it just disappears in his room.
When it tries to kill him, it's kind of funny actually.
Yeah, it runs
gets
away
startled by him. It like makes this weird like chirping sound and runs away.
Yeah, the way it runs is so good. Kind of with its hips like thrust forward.
I thought the owl's kiss looks similar to Ricky Lindholm, his girlfriend, who's the actress.
Yeah, man, maybe. Again, I think that's probably intentional.
Yeah, probably.
It's just another thing we can start trying to parse.
There's also Jesus and the Brides. We discover that all of Jesus's hit songs were written by the songwriter.
Yeah, well, we discovered that every hit song was written by the songwriter in a way.
That's a great scene where Sam has him pinned to the ground. He's like, which songs did the songwriter write? And like he names them. And he goes, you mean all the hits?
Yeah, all the hits. Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah. I also I love the vagueness of parts of it, that you never find out what his job was.
Yeah.
He never talks about it. Even when he goes to these parties and meets his friend Alan.
In the woman's blouse.
Yeah,
Alan,
and they both say they're working.
Yeah. Yeah,
But then he
Alan
asks
doesn't seem
Alan,
to have a job either.
Well, he seems, because Alan asks him, "Are you working?" And
Yeah.
then Sam is like, "Yeah, are you?" And Alan's like, "Yeah, just floating around doing my job," kind of thing.
Okay.
And then he's at the party and at the cemetery, and again he says like, "Oh, are you working here too?" So it's kind of a strange.
His other friend, the Topher Grace character, doesn't seem to have a job either.
No, I think he's credited as bar guy.
Bar guy, okay.
Yeah.
He just meets him at a bar. He doesn't work at the bar.
No, I think he's just his friend from the bar.
Oh, they didn't even give him a name.
No.
Wow.
But that scene's also like really dark, where they're flying the drone.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate voyeuristic piece of equipment. Like that's better than any telescope that like Jimmy Stewart could ever use.
Yeah. And then she takes off her top and starts crying.
Yeah. It suddenly goes from like voyeuristic eroticism to like, oh no, this is suddenly very human and I feel so bad.
Yeah. One thing maybe we should talk about is there's been a bit of backlash about the amount of female nudity and kind of voyeurism in the film, the amount of shots of like girls' bodies.
Like even the way the is it like Good Time Girls, the girl that he calls from the magazine, like the star,
star now, I think.
Stylist Star, yeah, something like that. Even the way she's like angling her body when she's walking around the apartment, it's like totally objectifying her.
I think it's all meant to be from his point of view, and that's kind of the way he sees the world. And it's interesting because it makes him kind of an unlikable character in certain ways. I mean, in a way, he's kind of like the stereotypical horny single guy.
Sure.
But in another way, sometimes it's slightly ominous, like when he walks out of his house and sees a girl walking and the camera like focuses on her ass, and then he just follows her up the street like staring at her. For no reason.
I don't think it's just objectifying women for the sake of objectifying women. I think it's there to draw attention to like toxic masculinity and the objectification of women as like a marketing tool.
Yeah, I agree. I think the backlash misses the point. Like I heard, I think Kermode mentioned it in his review rant.
Yeah.
But to me, that's kind of missing the whole point of it. You're talking about a director who's made his last film is all about kind of like a strong woman.
Well, even though the women in this are objectified in terms of their bodies, they're all very intelligent and have their own agency. Even though the women are objectified, like that's without a doubt they're objectified, but they at the same time have their own agency and aren't swayed. Like they don't just come to his aid. They need convincing if he wants to get something out of a woman, like information.
But also it's often the women that lead him to any sort of realization or even like a clue.
Yeah.
In fact, I think almost every time it's a girl.
Do you think it's problematic that they're so deeply embedded in that kind of underworld? Would you call it underworld? That kind of cultural in crowd?
Yeah.
That they haven't realized that it's all a lie. And like it takes him to piece it all together by talking to them, and they all just seem like totally disinterested.
I think what you're seeing there is kind of the general apathy of millennials, and how they just kind of, I mean, we are millennials, but how that kind of directionlessness and kind of tethering yourself. I mean, it comes back to the same thing we were talking about, like trying to find something meaningful and tethering yourself to that. And, you know, people thinking that they've discovered that. I mean, all these fans of Jesus and the Brides of Dracula, you know, huge amounts of fans, but then all their hit songs weren't written by them. So, in fact, is it meaningless? And I think with the girls, that's just the situation they are in at that moment. And I think the reason it's so focused on them, because I think the guys, if you focused on the guys, it would be the same thing. But Sam as a character, I mean, the whole film is from his point of view. You're never in the eyes of another character at any point, and he only really has eyes for women because it seems like he's brokenhearted.
Yeah.
And
There are quite a few point of view shots in the movie to establish that this is very much his perspective we're viewing on screen.
Absolutely. And there's never a single moment where you're not with him. You never like are in the eyes of someone else where something's happening, like a meanwhile scene.
He's in every single scene. Everything we see is what he's looking at or experiencing.
Yeah.
So like it's like living inside his mind, basically.
Yeah, and I think he's kind of your stereotypical millennial, horny, brokenhearted, single,
privileged white male, because he doesn't need to. Well, I know he's broke, but still he's got an apartment. He's got a nice apartment. He's got a car.
Yeah.
So like if he was working, he could still have all those nice things. He's living in the Hollywood Hills, you know.
Yeah. One thing I wasn't sure about, but I thought maybe is, you know, he keeps seeing the billboard for the contact lenses
with his ex-girlfriend on it.
Yes. Okay, that is his ex-girlfriend.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought, because he meets her at the party and their interaction's a bit weird, and I thought
he tells her that he saw her billboard, and she said, "Oh, those old things, I didn't realize they were still up."
Yeah, because it's never explicitly said that that's his ex. I just assumed, but yeah, I guess.
I pieced together that it was his ex because of the awkward confrontation and...
This is my fiance.
Yeah, the way she introduced the fiance, almost like a barrier, as in, there's nothing happening here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting then with that, on one of the final shots is, because there's a couple of times he's staring at that billboard, like he can't escape the gaze of his failed romantic past. And then at the end, once kind of the main mystery has been solved, half the billboard has been pasted over by kind of like a McDonald's ad.
Yeah.
Lining up with her face, like the face of a clown. So
does that mean he's overcome that kind of trauma? Maybe it was because of that breakup that he quit his job and all of these things and just kind of waited around like a bum until he got evicted from his apartment.
Yeah, or is it it's so in the air. Is it kind of, because the sign, I'm pretty sure the billboard is like exactly half between her face and the
it is, yeah.
McDonald's clown.
The eyes line up perfectly.
Yeah, is that like a comment on the duality of meaningful relationships and pop culture?
Oh yeah, how much is the attraction between you authentic, and how much is it like manufactured by pop culture? Like you're told to like this sort of person. Yeah. Well, the whole Dial a Star thing is playing up to that as well, because like you've seen these people on TV and like you can sleep with the it girl from your favorite TV show.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in that scene with the billboard, where it's that scene we're talking about, there's this really deliberate thing where every car that goes by, they have the music that's playing inside the car quite high on the set on the.
They do. You hear that Jesus and the Bride song so many times.
Yeah. And all these other different types of music. There's like Latin music and classical music, all these kind of interior lives and people being in this kind of, I guess the car is like this closed box surrounded by pop culture, because they have this music playing out of it.
Yeah.
So I guess, and it's in a way, it's also about the inescapability of that.
Yeah.
What did you think about the music in general?
I loved it.
Yeah, dude.
I thought it was really clever the way the music kind of overshadowed or kind of hinted at different thematic premises and kind of like different plot points. And like the Jesus and the Bride's example follows him around everywhere, because like it's at the back of his mind, like there's some sort of significance there.
Yep.
Until he sits down and really makes a go of trying to decrypt this record and break the code.
Yeah. But and I think the score is so cool because it veers between kind of Bernard Herrmann-y, Vertigo, like Hitchcock classic noir music.
Cool.
And then there'll be elements of Nintendo music in it. Like there's a few like bits that reminded me of like Scott Pilgrim or something.
Yeah, like 8-bit sort of aesthetic. Yeah. This is scored by Disasterpiece, the same guy who scored David Robert Mitchell's previous movie, It Follows. I think the score in It Follows also does something similar with like genre conventions, you know, like for the detective movie, you have the kind of orchestral, like kind of Hitchcockian, kind of maybe even like verging into jazzy saxophony themes.
Yep.
Whereas in It Follows, it has the kind of pounding kind of drums and like bass and things like that you often get in slasher movies.
Yes.
Things that kind of get the blood pumping.
Again, it's that like meta-modernism thing where doing that Bernard Herrmann-y Hitchcock music, the first time you hear it, you are kind of like, really? Like, he's doing that in a noir movie? Obviously. Like LA Confidential style.
Yeah. So he plays with your expectations from there.
He does, but then there's moments where like it fits so perfectly and it's kind of emotional. And you're like, okay, I'm being emotional about something I initially thought was ironic. This is weird.
Yeah. That's the tone of the movie as well.
Maybe there's something going on here.
That's the tone of the movie as well. It goes from irony to sincerity and kind of straddles the two things until you don't really know what you're feeling. But yeah, I suppose it straddles them until the two become interwoven and it doesn't really matter if it's ironic or sincere. You're just enjoying being there.
Which is metamodernism.
That's metamodernism?
That's their definition, yeah.
I think that might be a good place to finish.
It's kind of funny, man. I feel like we could do another 5 hours. I'm actually going to try and go see this on a cinema screen on Friday morning because I've only watched it on my TV at home, but
yeah,
I love it. I love it so much. I kind of have to.
I think it's definitely one for the cinema.
Yeah. So would you? I mean, I know we don't do rankings, but would you put this on your top films we've done so far?
Definitely, yeah. In terms of movies, I would compare it to. I put it up there with the kind of absurd qualities of Sorry to Bother You, and I suppose it also reminds me of La La Land a little bit.
Yeah.
So it is definitely in the top 3 of the movies we've talked about so far for me.
Yeah, I think it's my number 1.
Number 1, okay. Well, I always struggle to make a number 1 because I don't like to pick favorites.
I know.
So I'll just make like an arbitrary top 3.
This is the only one I've watched multiple times, and the only one that the first time I watched it, I went on like a 2-hour walk around London.
Just to think about it.
Just around parks, just trying to like work it all out in my head. But yeah, I just loved it. To me, man, it's like everything I love. It's like Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
Paul Thomas Anderson, The Long Goodbye. It's like everything I love in a movie, and it has like the deep philosophical, if you're looking for them, questions of like that, like I guess the house that Jack built had.
Yeah, I think it. Like when we were talking about the house that Jack built, we were worried that it wouldn't really engage with younger generations. It's more of an old man's movie. I think this movie is more of a young person's movie in that sense, more of a millennial movie. I agree, man. I hope it would still appeal to older people of the Lars von Trier generation. I'm really hopeful. I don't want to sound like pretentious or even condescending, but I found, just as an example, I found Mark Kermode's review a little bit like an old man shaking his fist going, "You damn kids, get off my lawn." Yeah. It just felt like he just completely dismissed it as this silly millennial like jerk off, basically. And I really hope more people don't do that. I think that might be happening with the critical reviews of it. It's not getting the best reviews, but it deserves amazing reviews. Agreed, yeah. And the good reviews I've read are very good reviews. Yeah. It's kind of in a similar boat to Sorry to Bother You in that sense. Yeah. And I think hopefully with time, as people revisit the movies, like when they come out in DVD and Blu-ray and things, people will, be watching them and rewinding and things, and they'll pick up on more. So like long-term lifespan of these movies, I think they will be very important in the canon of cinema. 100% agreed. All right, dude. Let's call it. All right. Thanks everyone for listening to Eye to Eye, the podcast. We hope you enjoyed. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram at Eye to Eye, the podcast, or on Twitter at Eye to Eye Podcast. Thanks for listening.